Hello and welcome back to our fantasy football podcast. This is our third week. I got with me George.
What up, guys?
And Dan.
Howdy, peeps.
So this week, we're going to start off right off the bat with, obviously, I lost the fantasy bet last week with the defensive streams. I chose the Raiders.
Would you like to remind the listeners about what the stakes were?
I was about to. Yeah, I was getting there.
Yeah.
So I have to eat a habanero pepper at the beginning of this podcast.
You don't seem stressed about it, which is good.
I'm bottling it up. Okay. Okay, without further ado, let's fucking do this.
Oh, man, I should be filming this.
Get that milk ready.
All right.
Okay,
Chew.
it's down the hatch.
Oh, you look fine.
No sweat yet. No
Is
sweat
that
yet.
good enough? It's like 3/4 of it. Oh my goodness.
He got
It's
it down
starting
this
off
time.
slow.
I can
Oh,
see.
it does start off slow. I've
It's
had
the-
it before.
slow.
It's the look of impending doom.
Oh, man.
Oh,
There's
okay.
there's a
He's
monitor
starting to
in the
pick up a little bit. It's not that bad though. I'm sweating though.
Yeah, it's not that bad though. As he wiped the sweat off his forehead.
I'm sweating. Okay.
Oh, boy.
It's starting to get a little bit hotter. This is definitely hotter than the jalapenos that
Oh,
I've
but
been
why
eating.
we got Darrian to host, but Darrian has to eat a habanero. That wasn't the best idea on our
Or it was the
podcast.
best.
Or it
One
was
of
the
the
best
two.
idea,
Okay,
yeah.
there's the first sip of milk. I needed it.
Oh, boy.
Okay, now it's getting really hot.
Your nipples are getting harder. I don't know if that's because of the habanero or what.
Oh my god, this is fucking hot.
Woo!
Sweat is just starting to pour on my head.
We're here
Oh
for
my
you, Darrian. We're
god.
here
Oh
for
my
you.
god.
Oh, are you okay? Oh.
This is fucking really hot.
Holy shit, drink that milk, bro.
He's
Drink
gonna
that
start
milk.
drooling.
Yeah. They are bad, dude. They're bad. Like,
No, they're great.
it only lasts, 20 minutes, whatever. Only 20 minutes.
Make
It's just
sure,
really bad when I exhale. Oh,
call your roommates or your family. Let them know that if they want to use the bathroom tonight, to do it before you get home.
So what you're saying is it's not too bad. It only hurts when you breathe. Like,
it's bad. It's really bad. My fuck.
I want to eat one now. They only come in 4-packs. Like, if I could have just gotten one, I would have just gotten one. Should we just all three of us just eat? No.
No, Daniel. No, we shouldn't.
Oh, okay.
All right, let's see you battle through it.
Let's go.
Darrian, you're a champion. Darrian, you're a champion. I'm
Okay,
sorry. I had to
first
do
on the
Yeah.
first up, we're doing waiver wire pickups this week. Who do you got, George?
I would just like to say I really appreciate the effort of you getting through that. But okay, let's actually get to the podcast now. Let Darrian recover a little bit. So my guy is Curtis Samuel, who's only owned in 9% of Yahoo leagues, and actually only had 37 total yards last game, but he was targeted 5 times, and it was in the first game without Benjamin, which is the most targets he's had since week 3, and he also played on 75% of the snaps. And I mean, my theory basically in looking towards a guy like him is that they traded away Kelvin Benjamin and kind of allowed, because they didn't want to have the 2 big receivers. They wanted to give that spot to Devin Funchess. And obviously you draft a guy like Curtis Samuel, a speedster, in the second round. You're looking to get him involved in the offense. And this is about that time as a rookie. You're halfway through the season and you're looking to evolve as an offense. It's that time where you want to get him more involved. And they got him a running play, a few 5 targets in the passing game. And I just imagine that as the next few weeks go on, he'll continue to play a bigger and bigger role and has big playability every single time he touches the ball.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I mean, his usage is definitely going up without Kelvin Benjamin in there. I mean, with Greg Olsen coming back, though, I'm a little bit concerned about his long-term usage. And if you look at his numbers, he's had a total of 9 receptions in the last 3 weeks, which isn't great. So he's averaged about 3 receptions the last 3 weeks. 5 last week, great. I just want to see where he goes from there. I wouldn't spend any fab budget or your waiver priority on him, but if he's for free tomorrow, I would potentially stash him depending on your bench.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of how I'm looking at it. As opposing, I just didn't see anyone really this week that stuck out as spend a bunch of money on this guy.
Oh, me too.
And give it. Whereas this is the kind of guy I look at and say you might as well get him on the cheap, and he could be one of those just like, oh, we didn't see this guy coming kind of impact.
Absolutely, no, absolutely, and I see that, and I would stash him if I had the depth. I mean, yeah, I'm not 100% sold on him, but I definitely see where you're coming from. His usage is definitely going to go up. The first guy I want to talk about for waiver wires is similar, related to him. It's Greg Olsen. So I know I brought him up in the last 2 weeks. I won't beat the dead drum. Just look to see if he's there. He got taken in a lot more leagues in this last week, but get him if you can. This guy, he's the he's definitely the number 1 target in Carolina, especially with Devin Funchess gone. Go grab him. Another guy I've got written down here is Josh Gordon. So like he's still unowned in many leagues.
Which is shocking to me.
It is. I mean, it is shocking, but it's not. Like he's not coming back till week 13. I'm not completely bought in on Josh Gordon. I mean, I think he's worth a speculative stash just because you get that week 13 litmus test. You get to see what he's like in the Cleveland offense to see if he's worth your fantasy roster. I'd only recommend him if you're set for the playoffs, like because obviously you're not getting him until week 13. He's worth that high upside play, but anything less than you being like, I don't know, what week is it? 9? Anything less than you being 7-2, 6-3, I wouldn't pick him up. And then Danny Woodhead is the guy I really wanted to talk about here. I know I've talked about him before, and the other two weren't too high on him. I'm not as high on him as I was before. But I still think Joe Flacco runs to running backs. Oh my God, Darrian is like gargling water. I'm sorry.
So hard. We're doing our best here to have a conversation. Let Darrian recover. This is fantastic.
I'm all out of milk.
How are you feeling? That's way more entertaining than whatever
really
I had to say about Danny Woodhead.
Hot, like it's not going away.
Oh, do you need to like go to the washroom and like?
No, let's get into battle through. Let's see who you got.
I'm ready. Okay, right. So for my pickup, I got Marquise Lee, 38% owned in Yahoo leagues. Excuse me. Oh my God.
What about your boy Dede though? What about Dede?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Hold on. So I think the way that Jacksonville's playing, their offense is trending upwards. Okay, even without Fournette in the lineup, they have been putting up numbers, and Marquise Lee has done a great job of getting open and turning his targets into production. So I obviously am very high on Dede Westbrook, and I think he will come in and make an immediate impact. I don't think that's going to affect Marquise Lee's production. It might affect his targets, but his targets will be better quality targets with someone on the outside like Dede Westbrook.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Leonard Fournette because I was wondering myself, are they throwing it more because Leonard Fournette's not in the offense? That's the only cause.
That's probably a big reason. Yeah. You know, TJ Yeldon and Chris Ivory are not the same player. It's just they're limited, right? Athletically. So back to Marquise Lee. He's in the past 3 games. He's gone 22 targets. He's turned that into 17 catches for 225 and 1 touchdown, which is very a quality starter for someone you could pick up off the waiver wire. He's got a very favorable schedule coming up against passing defense, especially against wide receivers. Weeks 12 to 16, he's facing 5 defenses that have all given up top 15 points to wide receivers this year. And I just really, just to hit on again, I think Dede Westbrook is going to open up the field, and Fournette being in the lineup, play action is going to work all day. And my other guy is Corey Coleman. People have just started picking him up this week. Last week I checked, he was under 2% owned. This week it's at 13%. And he'll immediately become the number 1 wide receiver when he comes into this offense. He's a big-time playmaker, great ability after the catch. He's got breakaway speed. And it's going to come down to their offense and how well they can get him the ball. But he's going to be upwards to 10 to 12 targets once he's healthy and in the offense.
But what about Josh Gordon?
Josh Gordon is yet to be seen. He hasn't played in 2-3 years. I'm sorry, I'm still dying a little bit.
Well,
it's not as bad though.
Even without Josh Gordon, my issue was just I looked at the stats of the other receivers. You had Kenny Britt, who they brought in the offseason. He wasn't even targeted last game. Ricardo Lewis is their number 1 guy right now.
Exactly.
Rashard Higgins broke out for 95 yards in week 2 and hasn't done anything since. My concern is just it's not even like there's a committee and they're putting up a few yards and one guy can maybe come in and step in with that number 1 role. I just worry that unless you have a Josh Gordon type just transcendent talent, their offense has been so bad in the passing game that I wonder if he can even put up numbers as a receiver.
I see where you're coming from, but I legit think Corey Coleman is a great player. He is very talented, and he's shown that in bursts and when he's been on the field. And I just think even with their limited offense, with him getting 10 to 12 targets a game, slant routes, whatever, get the ball in his hands, I think he'll have a very good chance of being productive.
I'm actually with Darrian on this one. I was super excited about Corey Coleman coming into the year. Then when he got put onto IR, I was a little bit disappointed. I see Kenny Britt as more of a high floor, lower ceiling, but I've seen Corey Coleman as that higher ceiling kind of guy, which in Cleveland, they're going to be throwing the ball because the game script supports it. If they're always losing the game, they're always going to be throwing the ball.
I gotta say, Kenny Britt does not have a high floor. Let's just correct that.
Sorry, not now, but when I came into the season, I looked at because he got it done on a bad offense last year, so I thought he could get it done again. So sorry, that was my preseason conception. I've changed that since. You gotta.
I think Corey Coleman. He's got a lot of potential there. There's a lot of potential. He's worth a flyer, definitely. Okay. And now we're gonna move on to defensive waiver wire pickups, guys that are under 40%, under 50% owned that you can start for the week. What do you got, George?
Okay, before I say this, I just want to point out to any of the listeners listening. Do you guys agree that based on the guys that we just listed off in the waiver wire pickups this week, I think that this is the week not to spend if you don't want to, if you have a high waiver priority, or if you
absolutely. These are guys that I would pick up after.
Yeah, for the most part,
after the bids go.
Don't spend fab.
This is not the time to spend your fab.
Pick these guys up because they're going to be on your waiver wire after Tuesday.
Just had to throw that out
after Wednesday
for sure.
But yeah, so for my defense that I would stream this week, owned in 38% of Yahoo leagues, it's New England. They're facing Denver this week, and anytime I ever have the chance to start a defense against Brock Osweiler, that is immediately where I want to go.
Quick poll: who's worse, Osweiler or Savage? What do you guys think?
I'm going with Osweiler because I feel like he just self-destructs.
But I'm going
to say Osweiler is way worse, man. He's got absolutely no arm talent.
I'm going Savage, but that's okay.
Tom Savage at least has some arm talent. He's got some power in his throws. Osweiler is just ducking every single throw.
Plus, you can call him Macho Man Tommy Savage, which is really all that matters.
And he looks like Nick Cage.
We have more data on Osweiler, so I can't say for sure.
But just to continue with that, New England in the last 3 weeks. They had a bye week last week. Before then, they had 13, 9, then 11 fantasy points. So they're consistently putting up decent points. And then obviously going against Brock Osweiler is a big one. But I'm just looking at the way the NFL season's going. This just has the feeling of that game where Denver gets blown out and their season ends kind of thing. They're already on the outside looking in after the last couple weeks. They've had bad performances. They gave out 51 points, I believe, to Philadelphia last week. And this just has that feeling on Sunday night of a 38-13 kind of game, and they just
especially with a Tom Brady, Bill Belichick team coming off a bye.
Exactly.
They get that extra week to game plan. You
really composed yourself. How's the mouth?
I'm actually doing a lot better now.
It was about 10 minutes.
Yeah, about 10 minutes. Well, I mean, I said 20 on air, but before we start, I said 10.
It's almost it's pretty much gone now. Thank God.
All right, well, moving on. I'm pretty confident with New England this week.
Okay, Dan, who do you got for your team?
Lucky that I wrote down 2 because I also love the New England pick. They were my number 1. For my second one that I had written down, I just want to warn the listeners, if you are driving right now, pull over. If you are for some reason conducting open heart surgery, stop for 1 minute.
Probably shouldn't be listening
and
to this
do better
podcast.
at your job.
I agree. You probably shouldn't. Just for some reason, if you're doing something important right now, because I'm about to shock you. I've got the New York Football Giants, and I know Darrian probably, I don't know, you probably feel something about this pick, but they're only owned in 26% of Yahoo leagues. They're owned in 11% of ESPN leagues, which is probably fair.
More than they should be.
Right, but they're not a bad defense, and they're getting Janoris Jenkins back.
Just to preface what Dan was saying, I forgot to tell everyone, our viewership, that I am a New York Giants fan on week 1. So
that's what I meant by that.
Just putting it out there.
Right, yeah. And and again, I don't stream a defense. I can't stress this enough. I don't stream a defense because they're a good defense. I stream a defense because they're playing a bad offense, and you don't get as bad as the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I think the 49ers might actually win this game.
What if Garoppolo comes in?
He won't, man. They're going to wait till after the bye, give him like a full 3 weeks to get ready. But I think this is one of those games you could probably play either offense and be okay. Or sorry, either defense and probably be okay. But I'm never going to start the San Francisco 49ers for as long as I'm playing fantasy football. So Giants are my stream. Woo!
Okay, just to be clear, looking at the 8 games that they've played,
I've seen it.
They had 24 points in one game. Their next highest total is 6.
Hence why you should pull over before I said this.
And last week they had -3. So just going to throw that out there.
I'm just throwing, my pick was New England, but hey,
Whoa,
I'm going with a bold stance here. I mean, what I had written down was New England, but yeah. I don't want to have the same pick as George. I think you can do.
Did you write them down or did you not?
They're right here on my page.
Okay, so you wrote them down. Okay.
So what do you got there?
Erase it. Okay, for mine, it's the Chicago Bears. 8% owned in the Yahoo League. They got an excellent matchup against a horrible Packers offense led by Brett Hundley himself. And let me just talk about the Chicago Bears D for a little bit. You know, they have a great front seven. They're built to stop the run. Akeem Hicks is playing at an all-pro level. And just a touch, they're going to stop the run on first down. They're going to stop the run on second down, and they're going to be forcing Hundley a 3rd and long all day, and I just don't see him getting it done. Chicago Bears, they have built this defense, with their front seven, like I said, and I think they're just going to be able to shut down a Green Bay Packers offense that just hasn't been, up to snuff since Rodgers has gone out.
This is another weird game where I feel like you could play either Chicago or Green Bay and you'd come out with okay points. Like, I don't think they'd kill your fantasy team to play either one. They're both playing pretty bad offenses. Sorry, I can see your face just like crying with the loss of Aaron Rodgers, George. I'm sorry about that.
It's a little different. But I'm actually with Darrian. I mean, Brett Hundley looked terrible in the 2 starts, and Chicago's defense, their whole team, but their defense has been definitely trending upwards. No question.
Their defense
they put up good fantasy
this
numbers,
year.
but just in terms of how they looked as well, the front seven's flying.
Yeah,
You're definitely
they're playing it extremely well.
If Hundley didn't run in that touchdown last night, his fantasy day would have been awful. But it wasn't good football.
Well, even just look at his production. I think he had 30 yards by halftime.
Yeah. He ended up with over 200. I'm pretty sure though.
And you just see that they have to change the offense completely because the offense of Green Bay is based around let Aaron Rodgers win the play. That's right. In New England, the idea is always to win before the snap. In Green Bay, it's Aaron Rodgers wins after the snap. So, I mean, when you have Brett Hundley in there, it's totally different.
So moving on, we'll go. Fantasy trade deadline is coming up for a lot of people. It'll be next week. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna talk about some guys that you should maybe trade away and maybe you should trade for. And obviously, when you're trading away a guy, you want to trade someone that you think they're trending downwards, but still will hold a lot of value where you can get something out of them. So I'll start it off with my trade away. This is a hot take. I'm saying trade away Julio Jones.
Okay.
This guy, everyone knows who Julio Jones is. He's a stud, okay? But this offense this year has definitely taken a couple steps back from last year. They're nowhere near their historic level that they were at. Julio only has 1 touchdown this season, and he's been battling knee and ankle injuries all year. And honestly, I just don't... He's got some tough matchups coming up, too, as well. And he just hasn't been producing. And I think you can get a lot of value out of him at this point. People are still going to trade for him with lots of value because of his name. And I'm sure he's, he has been putting up numbers in terms of yards. But if you can go out and snag one of those top RBs, Leonard Fournette, maybe make a package deal for Lev Bell or Todd Gurley, I think you could really come away being a winner in this trade.
See, okay, I'm going to have to disagree with you here, Darrian, because I actually have Julio Jones in my buy low section. I guess I got to define for the listeners. When I say buy low, I'm thinking like a guy who isn't doing as well as their draft price, who you can buy in on and I think will revert back to the mean. I guess what you're saying is you don't think he's going to revert back to the mean, so you should sell him while he still has name value. And you would sell him to a guy like me who believes he will regress back to the mean.
Yeah, you want to give me Leonard Fournette? I'll take it all day.
Right, okay, but my point on Julio Jones is like, he's worth it if you can actually purchase him. Sure, yeah, he only has 1 TD so far this season, but I'm going to spin that like a positive. Like, sure, he's never really been a touchdown guy for his career, but you have to think there's going to be a positive progression than just 1 touchdown. I know he dropped the ball in the end zone on Sunday, and it was just disgusting. That lob from Matt Ryan all alone in the end zone, and he dropped it. Yeah, it was terrible, but like, he's still Julio Jones. You can't just correct that from 1 game. It was bad and he should have caught that. But that actually goes towards my point, is that he should have caught that, and it's discouraging to see him drop that. There's probably an owner out there who's as low as they're ever going to be on Julio Jones after he dropped that ball, and the yards have still been there. So the fact is Julio's yardage, and he actually, I don't think he has that bad of a schedule, Darrian. Like, I looked it up.
Looking at here, you're right. It is a pretty mediocre schedule. But he plays Seattle week 11. He's playing Minnesota week 13.
Yeah, and I actually averaged it out.
And then he plays New Orleans twice, which they have been playing very well with.
If you average it out,
Lattimore.
He plays on average the 10th worst pass defense for the rest of the season. So that means he's going to be in the top third for matchups. Like if you add them all up and divide it by the weeks he has left, which is 7, he plays the 10th worst pass defense on average. So like that's not bad.
Absolutely, but that's averaging every receiver against that defense
per
week.
Not
if you look at the matchups, he's got Seattle, which is Richard Sherman. Yeah. He's got Minnesota, which is arguably the best corner in the league, Xavier Rhodes, and he's got New Orleans twice with the hottest corner in the league, I would say.
Yeah, it's the Tampa Bay and the Dallas that really brings down his numbers, because Tampa Bay 3rd best.
Exactly.
And yeah. I mean, obviously, divisional matchup, so it's going to be, like, nothing's predictable in divisional matches. But my point is that he's Julio Jones. He's never going to be this cheap. People drafted him to be that 6th overall pick, roughly. They probably drafted him somewhere in the top 6, or they drafted him as, like, a top 3 wide receiver. So I'm saying, like, people are disappointed from where he was, and I still think he is a top 10 overall pick, but I think you can trade him as if he's, like, a 20, 25. So in my opinion, he's a buy low, but I see the argument for why he's
okay. The one thing I'm going to say, I'm not going to agree or disagree. I'm going to say that there's one other factor that could put a huge wrench one way or the other in this, in that their offense has been absolute garbage, and you're hearing rumblings about Steve Sarkisian, who has taken the league's best offense and turned them into just you have a bunch of talented players, and you can't have anything creative happening. And they've got a big matchup against the Cowboys this week. And if they lose that matchup at home, I think it's really realistic to think that they fire their offensive coordinator and hire a new one. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
I think it can't be worse.
Typically,
I would lean to good.
Typically, it is not a good thing to fire offensive coordinator halfway through the season.
Well, the only thing that is
not
like,
for the team.
I wonder if it's a bad thing for the team, but all of a sudden, offensive coordinator comes in and says, "Well, we've got Julio, so we can figure out how to make it work with him."
Absolutely.
But my point is, like, that's just such a if you're looking to trade away Julio Jones, I think you have to realize that there is a lot of risk either way with the potential of firing the offensive coordinator. That's something to keep in mind.
I did sell Julio, but that was in week 3. I bought him in another league, so I've done both things. He's a confusing player. Like,
okay, so who do you got, Ted? Who do you got, George, for your trade for?
Or sell? Or are we still selling? Or sorry, because
sell.
Yeah.
So the guy that I'm looking to sell is DeAndre Hopkins, which makes sense when you think, obviously you're thinking, oh, they lost Deshaun Watson. Like, yeah, that makes sense. Who's going to really want to buy him? He's losing his value. But at the end of the day, he's still got a pretty decent amount of value. He's the number 1 receiver in fantasy. And the big selling point that I have, like, in terms of the fact that he still has value, is that in the first week with Tom Savage's quarterback, he still got 16 targets and caught a touchdown. So he's a guy that's projected still to be a pretty decent receiver. But the reason why I think that you've got to trade him is because you look at not only the fact that he has Tom Savage, but the playoff schedule. It starts off with the Niners, who is around league average of the 12th defense against receivers. But then you go for weeks 15 and 16, the Jags and the Steelers. The most difficult and the second most difficult against receivers in the NFL. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey's the guy you're looking at. Specifically with the Jags.
Absolutely.
The Steelers don't have that quite as much, but they're overall
defense speed. Great.
And so, I mean, if you're looking at a guy who's already, you got to imagine frustration is going to be growing in Houston. Their team's going to start really falling off with Tom Savage at quarterback, and then you've got that kind of playoff schedule. I worry that he's not going to have much value at all come playoff time, and if you can trade him at wide receiver 2 value right now, I think you've got to do it.
Yeah, Tom Savage only had a 43% pass completion against the Colts. If you can't get it done against the Colts, then you can't get it done. Especially like George said, his matchups are just awful, especially his playoff matchups. He's got that sale pitch of like he's the number 1 wide receiver. You can still sell him off that, and he got it done this 1 week with 16 targets. Everything's there to sell. Get rid of him.
Well, you can before things start going bad.
Absolutely. Okay, so who do you guys have on your buys?
I gotta sell. But,
sorry, Dan, you got your sell still.
I think the obvious. I'm gonna say an obvious one, then I'm gonna give a case for one that's not obvious. The obvious one to me is T.Y. Hilton. Like if you look at his numbers, he's been all over the place. He had a huge week, so sell him while you can. And his matchups are just terrible. I'm not gonna get into it too much, but he plays on average the 26th best pass defense for the rest of the league. Like I did the same stat before. He plays basically the 6th hardest pass defense every week on average. It's just insane. But the one I want to talk about is Kelvin Benjamin, and I know that the other 2 in here probably disagree with me just based on our conversation about him last week. But I thought about it a bit more, and he is a sell high candidate to me because there's probably somebody out there who has that belief that because he's on a new offense, now is his chance to go blow up. There's some people out there who just believe every time somebody gets traded, their potential on this new team is through the roof. So go find that guy because like I get the argument that Matthews and Jones haven't done much in the offense. So Benjamin finally brings talent to Tyrod's receiving core, but I think the causality arrow there is wrong. I don't think that it's Matthews and Jones are doing poorly in the offense because they're necessarily bad. I think it's just because Buffalo doesn't throw the ball. On average, Buffalo throws the ball the 4th least in the NFL. Only Jacksonville, Chicago, and LA Rams have a lower passing percentage than the Bills, who only throw the ball 51% of the time. Now you're spreading 50% of the time only throwing the ball among Kelvin Benjamin, you've got Jordan Matthews, Zay Jones, and you've got Charles Clay, who's probably going to come back in week 11. I just think, and also LaShawn McCoy gets a lot of targets. That offense lives and dies through the run. That offense lives and dies through LaShawn McCoy, and I think that just the usage isn't going to be high enough for Kelvin Benjamin to be good. If you can find that guy who wants to buy him, sell him, in my opinion.
Like you want my opinion on that? My opinion on that is, I'm never high on a receiver coming into a new offense in their first year. So I absolutely agree he will not be a factor this year. My only problem is who's going to trade? What are they going to give up for him, right?
Right.
Because he has done really virtually nothing
this season.
And like I really don't see anyone giving anything valuable for him. I absolutely would take anything valuable for him.
Okay.
So I do agree that.
So I thought last week we were saying that like he was good. I just wanted to put out there like
he's a good player. I like him being in Buffalo, but just fantasy relevancy this year. Yeah. I don't know. It might be in the playoffs. Okay. He might show up, but like.
I'll give a partial disagreement. I'm not going to strongly disagree because. There's a lot of good points. And the issue, again, what Darrian just said is that I don't think he has that much trade value, so it's not like you can sell that high on him.
Are you eating the rest of that habanero? I just look like you were. Sorry.
The one thing that I would say that is nice is that he is weeks 14, 15, and 16 going against Indy, Miami, and New England, who are 7th, 17th, and 2nd in terms of the best for wide receivers. And then just the one other thing that I would say is he could have a pretty good he could have some value in the play action game, I would say, considering how much they run the ball and being a big target like that and being able to stretch the field. But I'm not going to argue too vehemently because you make a lot of good points, Daniel.
All right. I thought that was going to go over worse based on our conversation last week.
Well, you never know, right? All right. So I think you should buy Ted Ginn Jr. Go after Ted Ginn. Go get this guy. He's been on fire lately, topping 10-plus points last 3 out of 4 games. He clearly has great chemistry with Breeze. Breeze hits him in stride downfield. He's the deep option. He's stretching that field. He's still got Michael Thomas on the outside, garnering the best corner on the team. He does have a rough schedule coming up, but that is a great point that you could bring up with the person you're trading for to drive down the price. And he's not a big name. He's not a big name guy where you're going to have to give up something crazy for him. I think you can go get him. He'll probably be a top 15 receiver for the rest of the year, I would assume, just the way he's been playing. And I just really like this New Orleans offense going forward for the rest of the year. They've won 6 in a row, mainly because they're a really balanced team, and Ted Ginn is virtually needed in every game script to stretch the field and to open up the offense and open up the running game for them. So I think, go get him, and I don't think you're going to have to give up too much for him, which is, a big plus.
I agree completely. And, in his career, he's been considered kind of a dropper, and he's been super efficient this year. His catches per target have been it's been increasing throughout the season, but it's been amazing. He has, I don't know the actual numbers, but I'm looking at it now, and, he was super efficient there for, 4 straight weeks where he basically didn't drop a ball. And I think that strength of schedule thing almost works kind of in his favor because, the opponent is lower on him, but also... the top corner will be shadowing Michael Thomas, which means that the guy who's going to be open is Ted Ginn, right? So, that's almost a spot in your favor, and it's a thing you can use as a weapon for your opponent. I agree completely.
I don't have much of an opinion. I just am always scared of Ted Ginn, but he has been different this year, so you're probably right. So my guy that I'm looking to pick up is Michael Crabtree. He projects as the 20th receiver for the rest of the season, but he's 6th in the league in fantasy points this year total, which is much higher than I thought when I went and looked at it. He's got 6 TDs in 9 games, and then he's got but the reason why I think that you can get him is he's had 3 consecutive games with less than 10 points and is heading on a bye. So if you are in the position where, say, you're pretty solid maybe with your team, you have enough receivers to maybe play through this week, and the guy that owns Crabtree in your league is struggling this week to find a play. This might be your time to be able to swoop in, offer a lower end receiver, running back that they can plug into their lineup, and then on your end you take him, you rest him for a week, and he comes back, and then you can have him for the home stretch. And this is a guy who will probably, he gets close to a touchdown a game. You can expect him to do something, and then looking at his schedule in the playoffs, he's got for week 14 it's Kansas City, who is dead last against receivers, so that's perfect. Week 15 is Dallas, who is 7th, and then week 16 is tougher, that's Philly. But again, for a guy who's got 2 easy matchups in the playoffs, you can get him right now probably at a pretty good price, especially because he's going into a bye if you're willing to swallow 1 week without having him, and he's a touchdown machine. So that's the guy I'm looking at.
All right, so the first guy that I want to talk about, it's going to be too expensive. So, the guy I just wanted to talk about Leonard Fournette. He hasn't played in 3 straight weeks. Sure, he's going to be expensive, but if ever there's a time that he's cheap, it's going to be right now, because maybe he burned one of your owners by being a last-minute scratch on Sunday morning, right? If maybe they didn't see it, they didn't pull it out. They might be tired of it because he was also a last-minute scratch back in week 7. So I'm saying if some owner out there is really frustrated with him, go get him.
That's where you do the Julio for Leonard Fournette, baby.
All right, yeah. Okay, so
that'd be a blockbuster trade.
I know. My buy low candidates have been awful, Fournette and Julio, but I'm gonna give somebody else who I just kind of decided on while I was sitting here. What if I told you this guy was the wide receiver 6 on the year so far? Because I don't think anybody really realizes it. I went from Julio Jones and now I'm moving to Marvin Jones. So he was this week's number 1 wide receiver. He won't see this kind of production every week, obviously, but him being a stud this week isn't a coincidence. Like, Marvin Jones has had double-digit targets in the last 3 straight weeks. Matt Stafford's looking really good, and now that Golden Tate's getting healthy again, Tate's drawing the opposition's best corners. So for a high-volume wide receiver 2 on a great offense, having the wide receiver 1 back for them is always good because that means that they're open. And since Matthew Stafford throws the ball 62% of the time, which is the 8th most of the NFL, that means that he can produce 2 wide receivers as long as he's throwing accurately, which this year he has been. Marvin Jones will be a great pickup to your team. He's 6th on the year so far in total fantasy points scored. And I think that's going to continue. I mean, he's got 2 great playoff matchups. He plays, Chicago and Tampa Bay. So Tampa Bay week 14, Chicago week 15. And he gets Cleveland next week. So, I mean, I think he's going to be a good rest of the season. I love me some Marvin Jones.
Okay. That's great. We're going to move on now. We're going to go to studs and duds from week 9.
Sweet.
So we'll start off with some stud players. Who do you got, Dan?
All right, my first stud player is Corey Clement from the Philadelphia Eagles. And he went 12 rushes for 51 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I just want to say, pump the brakes on this guy. It's a 4-headed monster over there. You got Jay Ajayi, obviously, and Blunt and Smallwood aren't just going to disappear from this offense. They're all going to get work. Philadelphia is a good offense, so anyone on that offense has a potential for 2 touchdowns. But similar to New England, they got 4 guys. Any one of them could blow up at any minute, and I don't think it's going to be consistent enough that he continues this pace.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Give me someone.
For my studs and duds, I got Jared Goff. Big stud.
All right.
Throws for 311, 4 TDs against the Giants.
King Goffrey.
You know, and I think he's going to be stud for the rest of the year. He's got so many weapons in that offense. Watkins, Woods, Kupp, Everett, Higbee, Gurley. You know, they have so many weapons. They're a very dynamic offense. They lean on the run, and then they throw in the play action at the perfect time. Goff has shown great ability to find the open receiver this year. He has no favorite targets. He just goes to the open guy, which, you know, you got to love when you watch a quarterback not force feeding his number 1 guy. You know, he goes through his reads and he finds the open guy. He's got a tough schedule coming up, but like I said, I think this offense is the hottest offense in the league. And I just think they're going to be able to run through a lot of these defenses, you know, first Gurley and then Goff finishing them off with some play action. And, you know, him and Watkins have really started to build a rapport for downfield throws. And I just, you know, his progression from last year to this year has been tremendous. I just think him going forward for the rest of the year, stud.
Starting to look like that first overall pick.
It's music to my ears.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so one of my studs for this week was Terrence Williams, who went 9 for 9 in targets for 141 yards. Just a phenomenal performance from him. But I'm viewing him as a guy who was a stud, but don't buy in on what you saw. Because, like I said, he had 9 targets, 9 receptions, 141 yards this week. But he had 9 total targets and 50 yards in the previous 3 weeks combined. And he's also not much of a red zone threat in their offense.
Stud.
So, yeah, I mean, he was a stud this week, but do not buy into that.
Am I the only one who gets confused when I see T. Williams and always think it's Tyrell?
Yeah.
When you see him on the waiver wire, I feel like that's not just me, but I don't know, maybe it is just me. Like, I always see them both on the waiver wire, and I'm always confused which one's which.
No, I know Cowboys players a mile away, and they stink.
All right, so yeah, Terrence, I agree with Terrence. I didn't mean to cut you off there, bro.
No, I just want to be. I just giving strong advice that do not pick him up and think that he's going to be a viable.
And also, good call on Robert Woods last week, dude. Stud, holy! I'm really glad I didn't bet you on that because I think I gave you some opposition. What 4 for 70 and 2 touchdowns? Yeah. What a stud!
That worked out.
Yeah, to go along with your Goff pick. Just the Rams got it done.
Who's got a dud?
So I got a dud. It's a pretty obvious one, I think, in my books, but he is coming off a good game. It's Ameer Abdullah. So this Lions running game all year has been atrocious. He's their leading rusher.
Oh, you mean dud on the year?
It's a dud.
Yeah.
It's a dud on the year. Like, he had a good game, but he only got 10 points in my league, but we do PPR. But, yeah, for the rest of the year, I really don't see him producing anything. You know, the Lions' run game has been some of the worst in the league. 20% of the runs he takes, like the handoffs, he gets tackled behind the line of scrimmage. That is the highest percentage in the league. He's averaging 3.4 yards per carry, which is just, you know, PU, stinky. Okay, so, and he has been getting the touches, but there's nothing there for him. This offense runs strictly through Golden Tate, Matthew Stafford, and Marvin Jones. And, you know, he will be their guy, but I really don't see him putting any type of numbers up. So I'm going to say dud.
He did also get benched after his second fumble in Monday night. So, I mean, just looking at that, like
he did have a fumble.
It's just like you get scared. Like, say just next week comes and fumbles early.
He was that one fumble away from having just a monster game though last night too.
Totally
right?
was, and so it could go the other way.
Because it could have been a second touchdown if he just didn't drop that ball. But
it's just scary when you're dealing with a running back that's already been benched for fumbling. Absolutely. It's like he's one fumble away.
It just adds to the dud factor.
Yeah. And as a team that throws the ball like 70% of the time, like you just can't trust him.
Yep, that's mine. Do you guys have any more studs or duds?
Or you got any duds?
One of my duds was Devonta Freeman, who had 6.4 fantasy points, 11 carries for 46 yards, and 4 receptions for 18. He's now had less than 10 fantasy points and no touchdowns in each of the last 4 games, and also no more than 12 rushing attempts, which is, I mean, you know they always split somewhat between him and Tevin Coleman, but it's been more of a 50-50 split in recent weeks. And just looking at an offense that's been trending so far downward and it was one thing last year when they were such a dominant offense. It's like you could potentially even start both of them. But when you've got an offense that's in the middle of the pack and you're looking at a split backfield, Devonta Freeman is starting to become someone that I'm scared of even starting. And I think that
that's insane.
Which is insane. He had 2 consecutive years, I believe, in the top 5 for running backs. So looking at the way he's been trending so far down, and in an offense where there aren't 4 or 5 touchdowns a game to go around, I'm very concerned about him as being a viable option going forward.
I want to say that it'll come back to the mean, but I'm becoming afraid as well. But if you have Devonta Freeman, you got to start Devonta Freeman. That's you're kind of
which also could put him as like a potential, like if you can get something for him, trade value going back to that last one.
He's on the injury report. He's in the injury report. He's questionable with a shoulder injury that he's been battling. With for a few years.
But especially when you look at a crowded backfield,
Julio's also questionable.
If he doesn't play one game or is ineffective because of that one game, like Tevin Coleman is right there waiting to try to take over that number 1 spot.
I got a dud. How about the entire Tampa Bay offense? Jeez.
Absolutely.
I guess more in particular, Mike Evans and Doug Martin. So Doug Martin went 8 for 7. Is that even possible? Like 8 for 7. Like that's
I think his last carry was with 10 minutes left in the third quarter.
He got benched. Yeah, he got benched in the third quarter. Like, I mean, I want to say he's just a victim of game script, but I don't know. I don't know. Because, I mean, they were getting blown out. They lost the game 30-10. Usually when you're down in a late game, you only throw. But it just looked like they hate benched him. You know, like, I mean, why wouldn't you? He's 8 for 7. And Mike Evans probably should have been ejected, but wasn't. He's suspended coming up for this next week. He only went 1 for 6 targets for 13 yards. I mean, obviously, AJ Green also got AJ Green and Mike Evans both with punches this week. I don't know. There's a lot that happened, but the entire Tampa Bay offense just laid a big fat egg.
Yeah, Tampa Bay's a bust, man.
Yeah,
totally with you.
And you know, Jameis is going to be out for a few weeks with his shoulder
Ryan
injury.
Fitzpatrick.
So that's our episode for today, guys.
Don't we have a bet to settle, or don't we have a bet to come up with for next week?
We
got to keep this going, don't we?
Our week 4 bet. So we decided to do. Who's going to get the top quarterback spot next week? Who's going to score the most fantasy points? So we did odds and evens and some rock, paper, scissors, and George got the first overall pick. And who'd you take, George?
And with the first pick overall, I like to take Russell Wilson Jr. III, who is playing Arizona this week, coming off a loss, going to go and rip up that Cardinals secondary and make Drew Stanton look like Drew Stanton.
And I got the second overall pick, and I take Tom Brady, TB12 baby.
Tim
at
Brady,
home.
bitch.
Wow. He's a Sunday night in Denver. Some would think it's a tough matchup, but you know they just they're coming off a bye. They got the extra time to prepare, and you know the way Denver's been playing, I just think it's going to be a blowout. And so, yeah, he's my pick. How about you, Dan?
Anyone who knows me knows I have a delicate history with this player, but I'm putting my eggs back into his basket. I won't get into it here. It's too long of a story. But I'm putting my eggs back into the basket of Mr. Matthew Stafford. He takes on the Cleveland Browns at home, and I just have this feeling he's going to burn me, quite literally. Yeah,
so what does the loser have to do this week?
I don't know.
Next week?
Yeah, what is it called?
It's called Tiger Bomb.
Oh,
and
my God.
it's going to be put in a sensitive area. right on the old testicles, and it's not gonna feel nice for
So George lost the first week, Darrian lost the second week. I just feel like it's in my cards. I got the third pick. I'm going with Matt Stafford.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not jinxing nothing.
I'm jinxing everything and saying that Daniel's gonna be putting Tiger Bomb on his nuts.
I like it. I like the confidence.
Is it better to wax? Should I be pre-waxing right now?
It's not fun.
You've done it?
No matter what you do. Oh, I played football for so long. We get Tiger Bomb rub downs. In the middle of the game, you get a muscle pull. We actually use this other stuff called.
But you've done it on the nether regions.
Well, it's sweaty and
it just gets everywhere. We use this heat stuff, and I got it. I had a big shoulder injury my final year, and somehow it made its way from my shoulder down into my pants. And let's just say it was not a good time.
I just can't believe I'm betting.
And on that note,
so on that note, guys, thank you for listening to our fantasy football podcast. We'll be back next week, and hopefully Dan's nutsack will be on fire. Okay, see you guys.
See you later.